Hello and welcome to the format The Meaning of Life. It's great that you are back with us and that you are spending your valuable time with us. Today's topic is very essential. The topic self-love. Self-love in 25 minutes. Let's see if that's possible. I have an exciting guest today. Stay tuned, we'll start in a moment. My guest today is Joshua Kohberg, neuroscientist. Welcome, dear Joshua.
Thank you.
It's great that you are here and that you are giving us a talk and answer. Today we have chosen the topic self-love. Self-love in 25 minutes, is that possible?
Yes, it is possible because time is an illusion.
Yes, very good.
That means we can't limit ourselves to 25 minutes, but we limit ourselves to the rest of our lives, and that's doable. But even in 25 minutes during the show, we can do a little bit.
Is it just a decision?
That would be the crucial question. Yes, indeed. I would say yes, it is a decision and you have to be aware of the scope. If you decide to love yourself, very strange things happen. You have to consider whether you really want them.
Tell me.
If I start to love myself, for example, then it could happen that suddenly many other people around me start to love me because I then drop a blockade. And you really have to want that. Because in the end you suddenly have a few hundreds, a few thousands, a few millions of people who find you lovable. You have to be able to deal with that.
You're kidding me, aren't you?
No, I'm serious.
Okay, I can imagine that. If I love myself, then it has something to do with the principle of resonance.
Exactly.
Then others can love me even more. But it is often said so easily, to love yourself. Is that taught to us at the start of life?
In fact, it is a standard with which we are born. If you imagine a child coming into the world after 9 months, the parents have been looking forward to the child.
Mostly.
We assume that they were looking forward to it. And then this child is there. And then you have to say it can be annoying. Then it just screams, wants to eat, wants food. All these things, wants to sleep, doesn't want to sleep. You have to take care of these little human all the time. And yet this little human is still loved. Where you should actually say, he doesn't pay rent, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't contribute anything to the community. What is this? And yet he is loved. And the interesting thing is, it is a standard setting with which we are born. The standard setting is that we are actually so lovable that no matter what we do in these 2.5 years, that we are simply loved. If it goes well. There are other cases, I don't want to rate that now. But let's take the standard. This child is simply loved. And the conviction that swings in this child can be brought to the point with 2 simple sentences. The first sentence is, I am. So this child is just there. And I am loved because I am. And then it gets interesting. From the 2.5, 3rd year of life, we suddenly get strange information that waters down these core sentences. Which then suddenly say, we cuddle when the room is tidied up. Or, you weren't nice today, but there's no chocolate today. And suddenly we have the feeling that love somehow has to be associated with performance. And then strange things start to happen. And that then continues to shape us. Then we might have the first experiences with the other gender. Then we have experiences at work. We have experiences. So many different things. And we notice that we are somehow only lovable when we do something beforehand. Or do something. And this idea can be explained quite well in these 25 minutes. Because if we recognize this idea for ourselves and say, I am lovable and I can be loved and I love myself just because I am there. And completely detached from what someone else thinks about me. Then life becomes exciting.
Yes, so we have found that the problem is that conditions are always tied to love. Then we no longer have unconditional love, but a conditioned love.
Exactly.
But I can imagine that after a 50-year life, for example, with many, many conditions, that it is not that easy. How is this possible from a scientific point of view? How quickly is it possible to get into a different mindset?
If I were to say a number, I would probably call myself a non-serious person. In my opinion, it is not really possible to say how long something like this takes. It can go very quickly, but it can also take years. The background is simply how deep I have fallen into my convictions. So if I'm 50 years old now and I've been doing a very clear program for 47 years, which has been repeated over and over again, then it can simply take a while until I notice changes. What is necessary for this is actually to pay a certain amount of attention to this topic at every moment of your life. Especially when I realize that I am also deviating from the right path. This happens to many of us. There are very different possibilities for what we evaluate ourselves. I drink a glass of wine too much and think to myself, now you've completely lost again. As an example, I don't want to talk about the glass of wine nicely, but I just want to express how I deal with myself. If something that has not gone optimally in my current, conscious view, and I still do it, I have to judge myself for it, for example. Or can I still simply love myself even though I did something that I think was not optimal? Or now I haven't done any sports for 3 days again. Or I had an argument with my partner. Then the question is, how can I still stay with myself at such a moment? I think that's the crucial question we have to ask ourselves. And that's a conscious decision in the very first step. To say, okay, I am just as right as I am with everything I have.
Yes, sometimes it can be. It always feels like a narrow line. Sometimes you might pull yourself out of the affair so easily. You say, I actually intended to do this and that, but I'm good the way I am. If I haven't done it by tomorrow, I'll say the same thing tomorrow, but I'll never get to the point where I actually do it.
It's a line, absolutely. I would recommend, to sort of end this line, I would recommend setting a big goal. Let's take a glass of wine. If that's my problem, I could go and say, okay, I won't drink a single sip of alcohol for 12 months. But I can only do that if I am actually aware of the value of why I do it. It's also an addictive substance, it's a nerve poison. You can consciously think through everything with the topic of alcohol. But the question is, why would I do without it? And if I put a big why behind it, let's take an example. I'm 15 years old and I realize I've been drinking too much alcohol for the last 15 years. Then the big picture could be that I could enjoy a much better health without alcohol. If I look at it as a whole concept, then on the one hand I have a body that I walk around with, then I have a mental area that I think with, and then I have a spiritual area where I say, maybe this is my big plan, my life plan. And if I say, okay, mentally, I work too much and I have to numb myself every night, because otherwise I can't do it with my work, and then I drink this bottle of wine, then I would actually kick my ass in an exaggerated way. Because it's part of me too. So now the question is, how could I create a picture that makes me clear in the decision, in the execution, and link that to love for myself, to love my body, to thank it, for example. Or on the other hand, if I have mental injuries, how could I look at these mental injuries? With which therapist could I do that, for example? With what kind of coaching, with what kind of support, to just heal my soul? If I say I have a mental problem, then I could think about what I put into my mind every day. Do I read beneficial things? Do I watch beneficial shows? Do I go for a walk in the woods and recharge my mind with the energy of nature? These are possible approaches that all peak in self-love.
Yes, so basically it's all about clearing up, or at least clearing up yourself with all your parts. We already made a nice episode about that. Really, really, really getting to know yourself. To really put all your parts on stage and then see if everything fits, if everything is right, or where are my injuries, and so on and so forth. Because all of that just affects my self-love.
Exactly.
Yes, so that's relevant. And if I'm not able to do it myself, then I'm looking for the best help. But in the end, we are certainly in agreement that self-love ultimately contributes to more and more health and joy of life and happiness of life. Is there anything that we can give the viewers that they can really work with now, and maybe even notice or see a direct effect?
I would really like to give that. It's a recommendation that I've been making for many, many years, and that I've been living with for 15, 16 years. I recommend taking a sheet as big as possible. So DIN A3 would be the minimum, preferably DIN A1. And there, with the most beautiful font that is possible, write on it, what do you really, really, really want? And hang this sheet, as big as it is, over the bed. That means, with this question, falling asleep in the evening, so directing your consciousness on it and waking up in the morning with this question. If there is also the subject of self-love, you can hang a second sheet with self-love underneath it. But this question does the following on a conscious level. It tickles out what I actually came here for. And if I can implement that in my life, what I came for. So let's assume I'm a musician, and I actually came to make other people happy with my music. But I don't do that at the moment because I'm making my money as a tram driver. Then at some point this question will make me start making music at least on my free evenings, and make people happy. And at some point it will lead to me doing it on the weekends. And even later, this question will lead to me being able to live from it. And then I'm suddenly in the flow of life. I'm just giving you one simple example. But this question is so crucial because it brings it to the point. If I reflect on self-love, then the question is, what do I really want? Many people can answer that. I want money, a relationship, a car, a house at the beach. All these cliches that you can have. But at some point, with the second one, I'm sure I really have to listen to myself, and I have to be ready to give something for it. So that means, if a person really lives in his self-love, then he is so clear, so stable in his middle, that he opens up and gives himself. A very exciting effect from the second question, really. And the third question, the third really, so what do you really, really, really want means that you go through this thing against all obstacles. Because it expresses you, because you are it. And that can be very tedious. There is a singer whose name I forgot, fits the topic of music right now. At some point he said, and the quote is awesome. He said he needed 25 years to become famous overnight. And I would like to pass on the idea to the viewers. Because if we really express ourselves, if we really live, then many other people will be negatively affected by it. Because they also have this desire, they would like to live. And now someone comes who does it. Then it's more like, I don't necessarily have to deal with that. All people who are somehow overproportionally successful experience it at some point. They say at the beginning they were hated. Gandhi, for example, has told that. So questioned, hated. And in the end they are all loved, because they really could express themselves. And that's a message that I think is important. If we love ourselves, there is only one way. And the way, you have to find it. And then to provide it to other people in the opening. Then we are running.
Yes, now you have just described the situation, hanging a large piece of paper over your bed. I think the thought is very nice, that you really fall asleep with this question. And not with the last impression you get from the news or from an action movie. But then you really deal with yourself. Is there something scientific that happens in the brain, in sleep? What can you say about it? If you take it into sleep.
Unfortunately, I can't say it explicitly to the question. But what I can say, in other areas in our company, we have done a lot with sleep research. Because I was interested in the subject of sleep in general. And that's why it's a very interesting aspect for me, which most people don't know, which I didn't know before. I didn't even realize that in my studies back then. That our brain actually works 24 hours completely with the same energy consumption. We have sleep phases, deep sleep, REM sleep, and so on, wake-up phases. But the information processing actually runs all night. And what we know, this is not a study that I did, but I read a lot of literature about it. What we know is that the last 10 to 12 minutes before we fall asleep, things bring into the processing loop of our brain, which are then processed all night. That means, in the sleep phase, we have a unique chance to learn something, or to ask questions. That means, if I have a question like this, and I really look at it, then this question is processed, but on a very unconscious level. And the interesting thing is that our unconscious levels are much more efficient than the conscious ones. If I take the consciousness, for example, with which we think, the Homo sapiens brain, the frontal cortex, then it has such a performance of a walker, so it works like a walker. And the unconscious levels, such a limbic system, work at double the speed of sound. So a jet that would fly at twice the speed of sound. Now you have to imagine, someone is walking and then he comes by with 2000 something. That's the difference. And that's why this question on the way to falling asleep is so interesting. Because at some point these answers are produced. They come up. And then of course you have to perceive them. I still have to pay attention to it. But at some point it goes, plop, and then I suddenly have an idea that I should actually construct bicycles, for example. Or something else. Or people, the care of older people, revolutionize. Maybe I was born for it. Who knows? And these are things that make it plop, and then they come.
Yes, that the unconscious levels of the brain work so fast, we notice that every day in our being. How many processes and how many things, how much, what we do during the day, is controlled by the unconscious. If we think about what processes take place in the body alone, that the body works the way it works, all of this unconsciously, without us having to waste a single thought. That's sensational. Does it make sense that in the morning, when you wake up, because you say, these things are processed at night and answers may also be found? You only know it from dreams, that you only have them present for a short time and then it's completely gone again. Does it make sense to put something next to bed, to write on, that in the morning, when you have an inspiration from the night, you write it down right away?
Exactly. If someone is so structured, definitely. Otherwise, it is also enough to look at the question again at the ceiling. If you wake up, look at it and then it can also plop into consciousness. As I said, you have to pay attention to what comes next, but it will come. And the same goes for self-love. If I have something that I really want, and then underneath it says, command, I'll say the word, self-love, then it will appear in my life. It's actually a program that I set myself, because I have this self-love. Every human being, every animal, everything has this self-love. And if I can't perceive it anymore, then I have to think about it for so long until it's back.
So that means I write on the note what I really, really, really want. And underneath self-love. Just so that everyone knows exactly what it's about.
Exactly. That can also be a different word at a later stage. You can also write down concentration.
But self-love is the basis of everything. And from that so much fruitful can arise. If one or the other does it, and it's not right after the first night that an inspiration is there, then you should be a little consistent. And that's why you say hanging over the bed so that you can read it every evening and not be disappointed if it's not there right after the first night. But it also makes sense if I read it again tomorrow. Not only so that I get the inspiration again, but also so that I go into the day in a focused way. So that I become more selective in terms of perception for everything that has to do with my self-love. That's the idea?
Exactly. And if you feel good about it, you can put these notes in the whole apartment. You can hang them everywhere. It's actually always just about always having a little bit of awareness about the topic. And the more aware you are, the more it will manifest. And of course you can do a lot of exercises with it. You can buy books on the subject of self-love. And maybe you'll come across the right book anyway. Just take a look at what would really serve me as an impulse on the subject of self-love. Or do some internet research. There are probably hundreds of thousands of blog posts or something. Just take a look at what's teasing me now. And if I do that in the awareness that self-love is, that's really my assessment, but I can only speak from my experience. I really consider self-love to be the most important key to everything. Because if self-love is there, then I turn to other people in a different way, also with love. And I will experience love. That's really nice. I just really have to repeat the warning from before. In fact, my experience is that 50% of people react positively to it and the other 50% react negatively. If someone really loves you and someone else doesn't have this ability, then they will react negatively to it. That means it will select itself a bit. But if I have a 50-50th split, then I know that I'm actually on a very, very good path. Because if one half of humanity loves me and the other hates me, then I have such a polarization that it works. So everything is fine.
Above all, I mainly have to live together with myself 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And not with the other person who might be in the way. So how is the weighting? So the weighting should be with oneself.
And I help to transform. If he can't stand it, he still gets a mirror and can start to transform, if he wants to. You have a free choice.
Right. I trigger something in him so that he gets the idea himself. Now you are a scientist and in your past you have developed a lot of tools or gadgets that also support people when they are at home, in their own pieces and alone with this note on the ceiling, not quite getting into the topic yet. Where can you find something about you, about what you offer, what you have developed as a help for self-help?
So there are various websites. I have founded several companies where I am no longer so active, but which of course all go back to my research results. So a main page, for example, is the company KOSYS. It also has my name, Kohberg Systems, that's what it's called. You can just go on there or on Josua Kohberg. So that's more of a page that tells me a little about myself. But you can also find all the links there. Simply josuakohberg.com written together, you can find a lot.
Because you also have you are wearing it on your wrist. You also have a gadget, I'll just call it that, where you can simply put programs over the skin, on the physical body and into the cells and so on and so forth. That's great support, too, isn't it?
Absolutely. So that was my first research work, actually. Because the question has always intrigued me. So in my first professional life I was very technical oriented. I programmed a lot, developed technical devices. In my second life, I was a neuroscientist. And then I realized that you can do just as exciting things with the human mind as with machines. And now I love both. So I still love technology, but I also love the possibilities that we as humans have. And what the NEOS does is basically an acoustic transmission without us needing our ears. So you can learn a language on the side, but you can also strengthen your self-esteem with it. So I developed coaching units, for example, which are very, very complex. So first you strengthen your basis with frequencies. That means I get more into my center first. Body, mind and soul are balanced. And on top of that, for example, I set up an 8-week coaching on the subject of self-love. So there's a lot of steam in the house. So we as humans can do so much for ourselves if we take ourselves seriously enough. And that's just the question.
And if we think we're worth it. Because I can just imagine, we're both in a happy situation, that it's relatively easy for us to love ourselves. But there are people with very difficult fates, where you may not be wanted as a baby already. We've talked about that before. I have that myself in my acquaintance circle. She tells me, during her entire pregnancy, my mother tried to get rid of me. And I can imagine it's extremely difficult to get into this self-love. And that's why I asked afterwards, what other possibilities are there, if you don't make it out of your own strength?
Exactly. Then really go to josua-kohberg.com, then there are actually all the links.
Yes, and of course, that's something you also have things that you offer for free, to find your own basis. But for something like that, you have to take a little money into your own hands. But that's also completely legitimate, because it's about nothing less than self-love. And that's actually the decisive, or can be the decisive turning point to something positive, to be positive. And that's why it's better not to buy one or the other, and therefore invest in something really valuable, which ultimately supports me in this goal, to love myself. So in that sense, we have unfortunately already reached the end of our time. It was very exciting with you again. Thank you very much for this valuable conversation and for the inputs, for the help you have provided. So I'm going to make my note right now. What do I really want? No, what did you say? Again, to repeat.
What do I really, really, really want?
What do I really, really, really want? Exactly, and if it's self-love first, to create the framework for everything, then subtitle it with self-love. Exactly, and maybe you also feel like getting involved in this experiment. More than nothing can happen, but the probability that nothing happens is just extremely low. So in that sense, thank you very much again. And good luck with self-love and your experiment. What is really, really, really important to you? Self-love, so that you can get there, to your self-love. I wish you a lot of success. We wish you a lot of success. And Josua will certainly continue to experiment and develop, to provide further tools in the future to provide support here. Thank you very much for your time. And I wish you a wonderful day. Goodbye.